Remember, for 3 years, the press's horror story was all about Trump and Russian collusion. Well, we finally found the Russian collusion. And the call is coming from inside the Biden White House. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, I laughed at the whole Russian collusion thing from the start. And as Trump sat in office there for 4 years, it was evident that he was doing everything Vladimir Putin would want him not to do. Let me give you the quick rundown before we get to the questions. If you want to strengthen the United States and strengthen our NATO allies and keep Russia from getting too frisky, there are only 5 things you have to do, and I've got them right here. You try and get NATO to spend more on its own defense, and Trump took a lot of heat for this, but he did try to do that. You promote American energy independence, and Trump got out of the way of fracking, and there we were, at $2-3 a gallon gas after all those years of war. Loosen Russia's grip on Europe's energy needs, and Trump did that with sanctions on that big Russian pipeline that they're trying to build into Germany. Provide military aid to Ukraine, lethal military aid, which Obama refused to do. Trump did. And of course, you want to strengthen the United States Navy because that's our sea lane of communication with Europe. And Trump, of course, worked on getting us to build up the Navy to 355 ships. Now, Scott, let's go to you and what I am calling Russian collusion. Joe Biden is undoing all of this stuff. Biden won't focus on NATO defense spending target as much as Trump. That's a headline right out of today's paper. Biden begins the end of fracking and destroys Keystone and 20,000 jobs. That was on day 1 of his presidency. Biden has lifted U.S. sanctions on that major Russian pipeline to Germany. And the Biden budget that just came out will actually shrink the United States Navy at a time when the Russians are building more nuclear subs and China's Navy already outnumbers our own. Scott, the press was harping on this Russian collusion thing for 3 years. We've finally seen it. Are you hearing anything but crickets?
If the Russians were really seriously trying to help Donald Trump get elected, they must have been sorely disappointed with the results. It's certainly not what they expected when,
Yes.
they put him in the White House. It's interesting because all of those things that you named could be looked at from the perspective of their sort of anti-Russian moves, but they weren't really. They were really just pro-American moves. They were looking at, in a broad geostrategic way, evaluating U.S. interests around the world and saying what would work best, not just for the United States, but for our allies. For example, getting NATO countries to pay more for their own defense, you could say, is a penny pinching effort on the behalf of the Trump administration to save money on the American budget. But that's not really what it's all about. It's about having a stronger Europe. It's about having stronger allies in that region who are able to fend for themselves, whether the United States is able to fund that or not. And so it's actually building up resilience within our allies to be able to cope with future threats. All of that makes sense in a pro-American and not a cowboy American way, but really in almost a cooperative way that says we want our enemies to be afraid. We want our allies to be overjoyed and excited to see us coming. But more importantly, we want our allies to be able to stand on their own hind legs. And yes. I think that all of this is a very pro-American way of looking at things. And no, you're not getting a lot of coverage about that right now. And maybe you could say the media is giving the Biden administration a chance to get its sea legs. But I don't expect I don't expect we're going to be getting a lot of contrast coverage about that. And this is the problem with news, because news doesn't really focus on substantive economic or, like I said, geopolitical issues. It focuses on little quibbles and fights and political tit-for-tat stuff, rather than the really important issues that frame the world as we know it today. So if somehow we could raise up a generation of journalists who actually looked at this and said, look, I'm not here to tell you whether President Biden's a good guy or a bad guy, or President Trump's a good guy or a bad guy. Here's what the United States is doing vis-a-vis our allies and our enemies, and this is how it's shaking out. This is how it compares or contrasts with previous historical attempts to deal with these similar challenges. And this is, kind of a, if you want to render an opinion, you could say this is kind of a prognostication on where this might lead in the future. But let's just tell the story of what's actually happening and the results that are coming from those actions.
Scott, you mentioned the media and the job they actually do. And I just got to tell you, I think it was Monday of this week that CNN's Brian Stelter asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki what they could be doing to cover the Biden administration better. How can we help you get your message out? So journalism. What are you going to do? Bill, my question to you is just short and sweet. If Joe Biden were just openly colluding with Vladimir Putin, just flat on his back, what do you need me to do? I am the Brian Stelter to your Jen Psaki. What would Biden be doing differently than he is right now?
Well, nothing, but the real advantage to the Russians of having Joe Biden in the White House is having Joe Biden in the White House. The individual things that you've stated are clearly encouraging Russian aggression and all the rest of it, but none of it is as dangerous as the fact that whether this is true or not, and I certainly have my opinion on it, Joe Biden is perceived as a guy who can't finish a sentence without the aid of a teleprompter. And that fundamental weakness in the White House, backed up by the fundamental unseriousness of the vice president, is the most dangerous thing that we're facing right now. All of these things that help Russia, all of the things you mentioned, there's more and more and more of them. They pale in significance compared to the perception that the American president will either not act or be incapable of acting if, in the event of him deciding to throw the dice and go long. That is the single greatest threat to the security of this country and has been the single greatest threat to the security of every country throughout history. That perception of either weakness or uncertainty is what encourages risk-taking dictators like Vladimir Putin to take risks. All of everything that they do is based on bluff and based on calculation. These are master poker players, the Soviets, and Putin is a direct descendant of them. We fail to realize on a continual basis how much stronger we are militarily than both Russia or China combined, for that matter. And so all of the strategic calculations that are done on the part of our adversaries are done not on the ability of what we can do, but they're based on the prediction of what we will do. And if it's perceived that the United States president is sympathetic to Russia, that's encouraging for Russia to take greater risks. But if it becomes official Russian government opinion that Joe Biden will not act in defense of Western interests, then we're facing enormous danger. And the same is true with China. The perception of a democracy as being weak, indecisive, past its prime, fat, flabby, and stupid has been something that has been attached to democracies since there's been democracies. The Spartans found this out about the Thebans and the Athenians. Democracies will fight when they're pushed to fight, but they always appear weak. And this is how you prevent wars, is to not appear weak. The last president we had used the single most powerful non-nuclear weapon in the U.S. arsenal against a small ISIS outpost in order to show the rest of the world and ISIS that he was not fooling around. And guess what? ISIS is gone. We'll see him again, and we'll see him again soon. So that's the single greatest part of the Russian and Chinese collusion that can happen from this White House, is the perception of American weakness, the perception of American vacillation, the perception of American indecision, the perception of American incompetence. And you throw all of these together, and you are essentially saying, yes, we're a bank, but we're not going to lock our money up in the safe. We're just going to leave sacks of money outside the door. And we don't think anybody will take it because we trust you. There comes a point, Steve, when you can be so, the point I'm trying to make with that is, there comes a point where you can be so lax with your own money that you're practically begging somebody to steal it. That doesn't take away from them being responsible for stealing it, but it does put some responsibility on your own shoulders. And if you decide to leave bags of money outside your house and all of your valuable possessions outside your house, and somebody steals them, it's still that person did the stealing. But to say that you had nothing to do with it, just not true. It's too tempting.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill, I'm glad you took a look at the big picture there. I want to take a look at a different big picture. When we talk about Russia, we have to separate the Russian people from the government of Vladimir Putin, because those are two very distinct things. Russian people don't actually get to pick their government. They hold these phony baloney elections. Putin had his last 2 terms effectively canceled so that he could serve 2 more terms, which will probably cover the rest of his life. Or, he's president for life now. He's a dictator. I would like nothing better to see than a strong and successful and prosperous Russia fully integrated with this amazing thing that we call Western civilization. And the thing is, that is where Russia was over 100 years ago, before the communists, before the Bolsheviks hijacked that entire huge country. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but Russia in the early part of the 1900s was industrializing even faster than Germany was or had during the 1880s. Russian culture, whether you're talking about food or music or literature or ballet, was the envy of the entire world, including even the French, although of course the French wouldn't admit that. And all of that was pissed away by the communists. And it looked like maybe haltingly during the 1990s that Russia was going to reintegrate with this glorious Western civilization. But under KGB-trained Vladimir Putin, that's just not going to happen. So I wish the Russian people the very, very best. I would love to see them restored to their full greatness and glory. You guys got to get rid of Putin first. And that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Just a quick reminder, content like this needs sponsors like you. So if you've been watching these for free, we'd love to have you on board as one of our citizen producers. Go to BillWhittle.com, become a member today, or just make a one-time donation. We'd love to have your support. We'd sure appreciate it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.